And the girl from the courtyard. The morning bells of Oreth Palace rang across the valley like silver arrows, cutting through the haze of dawn. Mist rose from the marble courtyards, curling around the columns like soft smoke. The palace itself, a fortress of white stone veined with gold, stood high above the capital city, its spires catching the first blush of sunrise. From the kitchens to the stables, the hum of waking life began. Servants scurrying, horses stamping, guards changing posts. Among them, moving swiftly but quietly through the servants' wing, was Ilara. She carried a basket of linens pressed to her chest, her steps light but sure, her dark auburn hair tied in a braid that fell down her back. Her face was soft but determined, her hands rough from years of work. Though her plain grey dress marked her as one of the lower servants, there was a certain grace in her movements, a quiet defiance that did not belong to one born into servitude. She stopped briefly at a narrow archway overlooking the inner courtyard. The air smelled of wet stone and blooming rose vines. For a fleeting moment, she allowed herself to dream, to imagine walking not as a servant through the corridors, but as a lady of the court, her footsteps echoing with command rather than obedience. Daydreaming again, Ilara? The voice startled her. She turned to find Mira, her closest friend, balancing a tray of breakfast platters. "I wasn't," Ilara said quickly, though a faint smile betrayed her. Mira raised a brow. "You stare at those courtyards as if you plan to marry them someday." Ilara laughed softly. "Better them than some of the palace men." Mira giggled, glancing around nervously. "Careful, the walls have ears here." "They always do," Ilara murmured, her gaze returning to the courtyard. "But they never speak the truth." The servant quarters of Oreth were a maze of narrow passages and dimly lit halls, built long before the rest of the palace. The walls still bore traces of the old stone, chipped and faded, unlike the polished marble of the royal chambers above. To the servants, the palace was a world divided, the glittering realm of the royals and nobles above, and the quiet, invisible life of those below. Ilara had spent all 19 of her years in those shadows. Orphaned as a baby and raised by the head laundress, she had known no family but the palace itself. She had scrubbed its floors, polished its mirrors, and carried its secrets, all while imagining what it would feel like to be seen. She was known among the staff for her diligence, but also for her stubbornness. She spoke little, but her eyes were sharp, always watching, always questioning. That morning, as she worked in the linen room, a whisper spread among the servants like wind through reeds. "The royal guard is changing. They say the new captain comes from the northern front. An ordinary soldier made captain by the prince himself." Mira leaned close as they folded the king's sheets. "Have you heard? His name is Captain Adrian Vale. They say he once fought 5 men at once and won." Ilara smirked. "And they also say the queen bathes in milk from silver fountains." "I wouldn't trust palace gossip." "Still," Mira said, lowering her voice, "they say he's tall, dark-haired, and far too handsome for his own good." Ilara rolled her eyes, but her curiosity betrayed her. "You've never even seen him." "Yet," Mira grinned, "but you will. They say he inspects every corner of the palace by order of the prince himself." By mid-afternoon, the courtyard blazed with sunlight. The queen's banners fluttered in the warm wind, crimson silk embroidered with golden serpents. Servants hurried about, preparing for the evening feast. Ilara carried a stack of linens toward the outer corridor when she nearly collided with a man in uniform. She froze. The man was tall, easily over 6 feet, his presence commanding but calm. His armour bore the insignia of the royal guard, polished yet unadorned. A sword rested at his hip, the hilt wrapped in worn leather. His eyes, storm grey, steady assessing, met hers. Ilara's heart gave a sharp, involuntary flutter. "I didn't see you there," she managed, lowering her gaze. He stepped aside. "Nor I you," he said, his voice deep but even. "No harm done." But when she passed him, she could feel his eyes linger. Mira's words whispered in her mind, "The new captain." Later that day, Adrian Vale stood in the main courtyard with his men. The soldiers of Areth lined up in neat formation as the prince himself, Prince Kale, approached. Kyle was young, perhaps only a few years older than Adrian, but he carried the weight of command easily. His golden hair and cold blue eyes gave him an almost statuesque beauty, though his gaze was sharp as a blade. "Captain Vale," the prince said, his tone precise, "you will find this palace filled with silk and secrets. Your loyalty must not waver, not to gossip, not to beauty, not to fear. Do you understand?" Adrian bowed slightly. "Completely, Your Highness." Kale's lips curved faintly. "Good. Keep order in my halls, Captain. I have no patience for weakness." When the prince left, Adrian exhaled slowly. He had fought in wars and seen blood spill across snowfields, but the court, with its quiet smiles and polished deceit, was a battlefield of another kind. And among its shadows, he could not shake the image of the servant girl, the one with the quiet fire in her eyes. Night settled over Oreth like velvet. The palace lights burned like stars against the dark, their reflections rippling in the courtyard fountains. Ilara sat alone by the water's edge after finishing her duties. The others had gone to their bunks, but she lingered, staring at her reflection in the rippling surface. The faint echo of music drifted from the great hall above. Laughter, violins, the sound of nobles dancing. She closed her eyes and imagined herself there, wearing silk instead of coarse fabric, dancing instead of scrubbing floors. A queen in another life. Then footsteps approached. "You shouldn't be here after curfew," came a familiar voice. Her breath caught. She turned, and there he was again, Captain Vale, his armour glinting in the moonlight. "I could say the same to you, Captain," she said softly. He smiled faintly. "My duty doesn't rest." "And mine never ends," she replied, glancing at her roughened hands. Something in her tone made him pause. "You don't seem like the others," he said. "Most servants lower their gaze when they speak to a soldier." "Maybe I've spent too many years looking down," she said quietly. "It's time I learned to look up." Their eyes met, a fleeting connection, fragile yet charged with something unspoken. Adrian looked away first, his jaw tightening. "Be careful, Ilara. This palace devours those who wish too loudly." "And yet," she murmured, "the ones who whisper never change anything." He regarded her in silence, then turned to leave. But as he walked away, she whispered to herself, "Not all who serve are meant to bow forever." Above them, the moonlight washed over the marble towers. Silent witnesses to the beginning of something neither of them yet understood. A story of loyalty, rebellion, and love destined to challenge the throne itself. The prince and the servant. The morning after the moonlit encounter, the palace stirred with a rare kind of excitement, one that rippled from the throne room down to the humblest scullery. Word spread like wildfire. The prince was returning from the front. Prince Kyle of Oreth, the Golden Heir. The strategist of the border wars. And the only son of the aging King Aldric was finally coming home. The great halls were swept, tapestries dusted, fountains polished, even the gardens, normally tended only once a week, were alive with servants trimming every petal into perfection. And amid the bustle, Alara found herself summoned to assist with the preparations for the royal banquet, her first time working so close to the nobles' chambers. By noon, the grand ballroom gleamed like a jewel. Chandeliers hung low, catching the light of hundreds of candles. The marble floors reflected the colours of stained glass windows, depicting the triumphs of Orith's past kings. Gold-framed mirrors multiplied the glow of the room, making it feel like a world of endless light. Alara worked silently among the servants, her movements fluid and precise as she placed silver goblets and polished plates. The scent of rosewater and spiced wine filled the air. Mira nudged her from the side. "He arrives at dusk," she whispered, eyes wide with excitement. "They say he's taller than his father and twice as cold." Alara glanced up at the empty throne dais, the crimson, banners fluttering gently above it. Cold or not, he's still the one everyone bows to. "Even the Queen bows to him," Mira said under her breath. "She's been furious ever since he came back from war, with more loyalty from the generals than from her council." Alara gave a faint smile. "Then tonight will be interesting." At dusk, the palace gates opened. Trumpets sounded, and the courtyard erupted with cheers as the royal procession entered. The prince rode at the front, astride a black stallion, clad in dark armour, gilded with faint traces of gold. Alara caught a glimpse from the upper gallery. Prince Kyle was not what she had imagined. He was young, perhaps 25, yet his face bore the quiet gravity of a man twice that age. His jaw was sharp, his mouth unsmiling, but his eyes, deep storm blue and intense, carried the weight of someone who had seen too much of death and victory alike. As he dismounted, the nobles bowed low. The Queen, Lady Seraphine, elegant and cunning, kissed her son's cheek with practised warmth. "My beloved Kale," she said, voice smooth as honey, "Orith shines brighter upon your return." "The kingdom has endured, mother," he replied coolly. "Let us ensure it continues to." The crowd laughed lightly, but Alara saw the flicker of irritation in the Queen's gaze. It was a look Alara recognized, the same look of power meeting resistance. That night, the feast began with grandeur unmatched. Tables lined the hall, groaning with roasted pheasant, honeyed bread, and golden fruit. Music filled the air, strings, flutes, and the soft rhythm of drums. Alara moved among the servants, refilling goblets and serving dishes, her every step measured. She was one of dozens, invisible in her uniform grey, yet her eyes kept drifting toward the dais, where the prince sat beside his mother, the king at the centre. Adrian Vale stood guard behind the throne, his presence quiet but commanding. Their eyes met briefly, a fleeting recognition from the night before. He did not smile, but his gaze softened for a heartbeat before returning to his duty. Alara tried to ignore the quickened beat of her heart and focused on her tray. But then a sharp voice cut through the music. "Girl!" She turned. The Queen's attendant, Lady Avelle, gestured impatiently. "You, the one with the braid, pour for His Highness." Alara froze. His Highness? The Prince? The attendant's eyes narrowed. "Now!" With trembling hands, she stepped toward the dais, the silver pitcher balanced carefully in her grasp. The murmuring of nobles faded into a low hum as she approached. Prince Kale's gaze lifted toward her. For a moment, the world seemed to narrow until only his eyes remained, cool, assessing, and unreadable. Alara bowed, pouring wine into his goblet without meeting his gaze. But as she turned to retreat, his voice stopped her. "Your name," he said quietly. She hesitated, then whispered, "Alara, Your Highness," Look at me, Alara." Her breath caught. Slowly, she raised her eyes. The hall fell silent. Kyle studied her, his expression unreadable. "You serve in the lower quarters?" "Yes, my lord." "You carry yourself as though you were trained in courtly manner." A murmur rippled through the nobles. Alara swallowed, her pulse quickening. "I serve with care, as all should." Kale's lips curved ever so slightly. "A wise answer." Then, dismissively, he waved his hand. "Go on." Alara bowed deeply and stepped back, her heart pounding in her chest. The whispers followed her, like silk threads pulling tight around her name. After the feast, when the nobles drifted into the night and music faded into quiet echoes, Kyle lingered in the empty hall, his fingers resting on the rim of his goblet. Adrian approached. "You looked as though something troubled you, sire." Kale's gaze lingered on the door through which Alara had disappeared. That servant... Alara! Adrian's jaw tightened slightly. "Yes, Your Highness?" "She's unlike the others. Her speech, her posture, even her eyes, there's something in them." Adrian hesitated. "Perhaps she simply learned quickly, my lord." Kyle's eyes flicked toward him, sharp and knowing. "Or perhaps she's something more." The prince rose. "Find out who she is, Captain Vale, quietly." Adrian bowed. "At once." But as he turned away, an uneasy feeling coiled in his chest. He knew what palace curiosity could become, and what it could destroy. 2 nights later the rain came, a sudden storm that drenched the palace gardens and filled the air with thunder. Alara had been sent to deliver records to the palace library. The grand chamber was empty save for the crackle of the fire and the scent of old parchment. She moved quietly among the shelves, her candle flickering. Then came the sound of footsteps. She turned and froze. Prince Kyle stood by the fireplace, a book in his hand, dressed not in armor, but in simple black attire. The stormlight through the windows painted silver along his shoulders. Alara lowered her gaze. "Forgive me, my lord. I didn't know you were here." "Few do," he said. "This place is my refuge." He approached slowly, his voice low. "You are Alara, are you not? The one who poured my wine?" Her heart fluttered. "Yes, my lord." He studied her face. "You speak like a noble's daughter." "I grew up in the palace," she replied carefully. "Perhaps their words have rubbed off on me." Kyle's lips curved faintly. "And yet there's defiance in you. Do you not fear your station?" "I fear injustice more than punishment," she said before she could stop herself. Kale's brows lifted slightly. Surprised, perhaps intrigued. "You are bold," he said at last. "That can be dangerous here." "Then perhaps," she replied softly, "danger is the only thing that keeps one alive." A long silence stretched between them, filled only by the patter of rain. For a moment, Kyle saw not a servant, but something luminous. The way the candlelight caught her eyes, not submissive, but searching, stirred something in him he had long buried. Then a door creaked open. Adrian stepped in, water dripping from his cloak. His gaze darted between them. "My lord," he said firmly, "the council awaits you." Kale straightened, his mask of authority snapping back into place. "Very well." He paused at the door. "Alara." "Yes, my lord. I'll remember that name." And then he was gone, leaving the air charged with the kind of silence that lingers long after words fade. When Alara turned to leave, Adrian stepped into her path. "You should be more careful," he said quietly. "I didn't seek him out." "But he sought you," Adrian replied, "and that makes you more visible than you can afford to be." She met his eyes. "Why do you care?" He hesitated. "Because I've seen what happens to those who draw the prince's attention, Some are rewarded, others disappear. Elara drew in a steady breath. Then perhaps it's better to live dangerously than die unseen. A shadow crossed Adrian's face, admiration mingled with worry. You speak like someone who's never known fear. I've known it, she said softly. I just stopped letting it decide who I am. For a moment, neither spoke. The thunder rumbled again, echoing through the marble halls. Then Adrian stepped aside, his voice low. Then may the gods guard you, Elara. You'll need more than courage in this palace. That night, Cale stood on the balcony of his chamber, the rain washing over the marble railings. Below, the palace lay still, save for one faint light flickering in the servants' quarters. He knew it was hers. For the first time in years, his thoughts strayed from war and duty. He found himself wondering what it would be like to speak without title, to live without throne, to be seen not as a prince, but as a man. He closed his eyes, feeling the storm pass. In another world, perhaps, they might have met as equals. But this was Oreth, a palace built on blood, secrets, and the unyielding rule of birthright. And even as he tried to dismiss the thought of her, the image of the servant girl, bold, unafraid, beautiful in defiance, stayed with him. A spark, unnoticed by all, had been lit in the heart of the palace, and it would burn brighter than either of them could yet imagine. Whispers in the marble halls. The storm had passed, but its echo lingered, in puddles along the stone corridors, in the restless wind that brushed through the open arches, and in the hearts of those who had weathered the night's secrets. In the grand palace of Oreth, whispers travelled faster than fire. It took only 2 dawns for every servant, guard and courtier to hear it, a rumour soft as silk, but sharp as steel. The prince spoke to a servant in the royal library. He called her by name. He remembered her. And though no one dared speak the name aloud in the queen's presence, Elara felt the weight of their glances wherever she walked. By the 3rd morning, the air in the servants' wing was heavy with tension. As Elara carried folded linens through the hall, 2 maids paused their conversation the moment she passed. "Her?" one whispered, thinking she was out of earshot. "She's the one. Careful," the other murmured. "Lady Avelle saw her again last night near the prince's quarters. Then she's either a fool or very clever." Elara kept her head high, though her heart pounded. She had done nothing wrong, and yet in a palace like Oreth, perception mattered more than truth. By the time she reached the laundry hall, Mira was waiting, wringing her hands. "Elara," she hissed, dragging her into a quiet corner. "The Queen's steward asked for your name this morning." Elara frowned. "Why?" Mira bit her lip. "I don't know. But Elara, whatever is happening between you and the prince, stop it. There's nothing happening." "Maybe not yet," Mira said softly, "but it doesn't matter. To them the idea alone is enough to destroy you." Elara looked down at her hands, the same hands that had scrubbed the palace floors since childhood, and felt a strange ache. "Why must it be wrong to be noticed?" she whispered. "Because you were never meant to be seen," Mira replied, her voice trembling. "None of us were." In the upper wing, Queen Seraphine sat by the window of her solar, sunlight catching on the pearls that adorned her throat. She was a woman carved from grace and ambition, her beauty still striking, her mind as sharp as the jewelled pins in her hair. Before her stood Lady Avelle, her most trusted attendant. "You're certain of what you saw?" the Queen asked, her tone like honey poured over thorns. "Yes, Your Grace," Avelle said quickly. "The servant, the girl called Elara, was seen twice near His Highness since his return. Once in the library, and once delivering letters outside his chambers." Seraphine's eyes narrowed. "Letters? From whom? No one knows. The guards at the post claimed that she said they were for the steward, but you doubt it. Yes, my queen." Seraphine rose, her silken gown whispering across the floor. "The prince grows restless. War teaches men to crave danger. And what greater danger than a pretty servant who forgets her place?" Yvel bowed her head. "Shall I handle it?" The queen's smile was faint but cold. "Not yet. Let the girl believe she's unseen. Sometimes prey is best caught when it thinks it's safe." She turned toward the window, watching the courtyard below, where far beneath her, Alara crossed the stones carrying a tray of folded robes. "Find out who she is," Seraphine murmured, "and why her name sounds like one I have heard before." That evening, Captain Adrian Vale walked the outer ramparts alone. The air was crisp, carrying the scent of rain-soaked stone. Below him, the torches flickered like restless stars. He had been a soldier all his life, loyal, disciplined, unflinching. Yet since his arrival at the palace, the rules that had once seemed so clear were beginning to blur. He had seen what the prince's interest could do to those caught in its light. He had seen ambition, ruin, even death, born from a single glance. And now he feared Alara was walking straight into it. He found her near the courtyard well, washing silks in silence. The moonlight caught on her hair, turning it to a bronze shimmer. "Alara," he said softly. She looked up, startled. "Captain, you shouldn't be out here alone after curfew." She smiled faintly. "You seem to make a habit of reminding me that. It's my duty." "No," she said, her voice gentler now. "It's your kindness." For a moment, something unspoken hung between them. Then Adrian exhaled. "Listen to me," he said. "There are eyes on you, powerful ones. Whatever passed between you and the prince, end it before it begins." Alara's gaze faltered. "I didn't choose his attention." "No," he said, stepping closer. "But now that you have it, it will consume you." She met his eyes. "Would you have me hide from it? I'd have you survive it." Silence stretched, filled only by the soft trickle of the well. Then, quietly, she said, "Do you think I'm like the others, Captain Vale, that I'll bow, beg, and vanish?" Adrian's jaw tightened. "No," he said at last, "and that's what frightens me most." The next day, while assisting in the old archives, Alara stumbled upon something strange. She had been tasked with dusting the scroll shelves, a task she'd done dozens of times, when one loose panel in the wooden frame caught her sleeve. Behind it, she found a hidden compartment. Inside lay a small leather-bound book, its edges cracked with age. The emblem on the cover, a phoenix crowned with gold, was one she recognized only from the royal banners. Curiosity overcame fear. She opened it. Inside were records of noble lineages, generations of Orith's bloodline. But one name, half scratched and faded, drew her eye. Beneath it, barely legible, a note in an older hand read, "Hidden among the servants, the child bears the mark." Alara's breath caught. Her heart pounded as she touched the page. The mark! Her mind flashed to the strange birthmark on her shoulder, a curved scar shaped like a wing. Could it be coincidence? She slammed the book shut, her hands trembling. But before she could replace it, a voice spoke behind her. "Curiosity is a dangerous thing in this palace, Alara." She spun around. Prince Kyle stood in the doorway, his gaze sharp as glass. I was only cleaning, my lord," she stammered. "Were you?" he said quietly, stepping closer. "Or were you searching for something?" She met his eyes, and for a heartbeat, the truth trembled on her lips. But then she remembered Adrian's warning. the Queen's watchful eyes, and the growing weight of whispers. "I serve my lord," she said instead, steadying her voice. "That is all I've ever done." Cale studied her for a long moment, then took the book from her trembling hands. He glanced at the emblem, his brows knitting briefly before he closed it. "Be careful," he said, his voice low. "The palace keeps its ghosts well hidden, and it punishes those who disturb them." He turned and left, his cloak brushing against the stone floor. Alara stood frozen, her pulse echoing in her ears. She didn't yet know if the prince's warning was for her protection, or his own. That night, Queen Seraphine met with her spies in secret. "The girl's name is Alara," one whispered, "orphaned as an infant, raised by the laundress. But there's something else. She bears a mark upon her shoulder, one the healers recognized." Seraphine's eyes glinted. "A wing, perhaps?" "Yes, my queen." A smile curved her lips, cold, deliberate. "So, the ghost of Elisanda returns." "What shall we do?" the spy asked nervously. "Nothing," Seraphine purred. "Not yet. Let her draw the prince's favor. Let him bring her close. And when the time comes—" Her fingers tightened around her goblet. "We'll remind the kingdom what happens when forbidden blood reaches for the throne." Meanwhile, in the quiet of the servant quarters, Alara traced the shape of her birthmark in the dim candlelight. The revelation burned in her mind. A lost name, a forgotten lineage, a past buried beneath layers of servitude. Who am I really? The wind howled through the window, carrying the faint sound of distant bells. Somewhere beyond those walls, Cale and his mother plotted their own games of power. Somewhere in the shadows, Adrian kept watch, torn between duty and something deeper. And in the heart of the palace, unseen by all, destiny stirred awake. Alara whispered to herself, her voice trembling but fierce, "If I was born in their shadows, I will rise in their light." The night answered only with silence, but in that silence something ancient shifted. The servant girl was no longer dreaming of freedom. She was beginning to remember that she might have been born for it. The rose and the blade spring unfurled across Oreth like a sigh of relief. The gardens burst into bloom, and the marble courtyards shimmered under the warmth of new sunlight. But beauty, as always in the palace, was only a mask. Beneath it, secrets multiplied, and hearts became weapons. A month had passed since Alara discovered the book in the archives. Since then, she had carried its secret like a flame hidden beneath her ribs, the truth that her blood might not be common after all. She had no proof, only a whisper from the past, and the gnawing suspicion that the Queen already knew. The palace moved as though nothing had changed. The nobles schemed, the servants obeyed, and the prince ruled with his cold efficiency. But in the quiet corners where the marble walls met shadow, something else was unfolding, something that neither crown nor title could contain. It began with a tournament, a celebration held in honor of Prince Cale's return and his impending betrothal. Trumpets rang out across the valley, echoing through the gardens. Nobles arrived in carriages draped with banners, their jewels flashing in the sun. The Queen watched from her balcony, a figure of regal perfection, while Kyle prepared to enter the lists as custom demanded. To the common eye, it was a spectacle of chivalry. To those who understood the court, it was a performance of politics, a show of power meant to seal alliances. And to Alara, standing among the servants lining the field, it was the moment she saw her world fracture. From the north gate came a procession of riders bearing the silver crest of House Varian. At its centre rode Lady Alessandra Varian, daughter of the Northern Duke, Cale's future bride. Elara had heard the rumours that Lady Alessandra was beautiful, educated, and shrewd. But the truth was worse. She was exquisite. Her hair was spun gold, her bearing regal and poised. When she dismounted beside the prince, her smile was a dagger wrapped in silk. Kyle bowed with formal grace, his expression unreadable. "Lady Alessandra," he said. "My prince," she replied, her voice soft but clear. "It seems the war left your kingdom untouched, and your people loyal." "For now," Cale said. The courtiers laughed politely, but Elara saw something flicker behind his eyes, that same restless weariness he carried after the war. And then, for the briefest moment, those eyes found hers across the field. A heartbeat's glance, a memory of the library, the silence of rain, the whisper of her name. Elara looked away quickly, her pulse hammering. The field roared with cheers as the knights took their places. Lances gleamed, armour flashed, the banners of Oreth whipped in the wind. Adrian Vale sat astride a white horse, his armour silvered by sunlight. Though captain of the guard, he had been persuaded to compete for the honour of Oreth. He was no courtly knight, but in skill none could match him. Cale watched from the royal stand, his face impassive, as Adrian lowered his visor and prepared to face the northern champion. The crowd hushed, the signal horn blared. 2 horses thundered forward. Lances met with a clash that sent shards of wood flying. Adrian struck true, unhorsing his opponent with brutal precision. The crowd erupted in applause. The queen smiled faintly, though her eyes were calculating. But as Adrian removed his helmet, his gaze found Elara among the servants. She clapped like the others, but her expression was distant, lost somewhere between fear and admiration. Later that evening, after the feasting began, Elara slipped away to the lower gardens to catch her breath. The air was thick with roses, their perfume heavy and sweet. She sat by the fountain, dipping her fingers into the cool water, trying to silence the thoughts clawing through her mind. She did not hear the footsteps until they were close. "Do you always run from celebrations?" She turned. Prince Kyle stood before her, no longer in ceremonial armour, but a dark tunic embroidered with gold thread. The moonlight cut across his face, sharp and softened all at once. "I'm not meant to be part of them, my lord," she said quietly. "Neither am I," he murmured, stepping closer. "A prince among flatterers is no freer than a bird in a gilded cage." Elara looked up, startled by the weariness in his voice. "You speak as though you envy the ones below. Perhaps I do." His gaze lingered on her, searching. "When I'm among them, I feel the truth. Here, every smile hides a dagger." She hesitated. "And what of me, my lord? Do you see a dagger there too?" Kyle's lips curved faintly. "No, I see a rose growing through stone." For a moment, silence stretched between them, taut, fragile, and charged with something neither dared name. The night hummed around them, cicadas singing softly. Elara whispered, "Your mother watches everything." "I know," Cale said, his tone tightening, "but I find I care less with each passing day." "You should care," she said, her voice trembling. "She's dangerous." "So are you," he said, stepping close enough that the scent of roses and steel surrounded them both. "You make me forget who I'm supposed to be." Elara drew a slow breath. "And who are you supposed to be?" "A ruler," he said, "a weapon, a man who does not feel." "Then you're failing," she whispered. Kyle's jaw clenched, and then, as if caught by a force greater than duty, he reached for her hand. His touch was warm, unsteady. "Tell me, Elara," he murmured, "if you could leave this place, would you?" She hesitated. "Once, yes, but now?" "Now?" he pressed. She met his eyes. Now I think I was meant to change it. Something flickered between them. Understanding, defiance, longing. And before either could speak again, footsteps echoed down the path. Adrian's voice cut through the darkness. "Your Highness!" Cale dropped her hand instantly, his expression hardening. "Captain!" Adrian's eyes flicked between them, sharp, knowing, pained. "The Queen requests your presence. She grows impatient." Cale nodded curtly. "Tell her I'll come shortly." But Adrian didn't leave. His gaze lingered on Elara, silent warning blazing in his eyes. Then he turned and strode back toward the palace. When Tigaitu, Cale looked at her again. She had already stepped back, her expression unreadable. "Go," she said softly, "before your crown starts asking questions." Cale studied her for one long moment, then turned and walked away, vanishing into the maze of roses. Elara sank against the fountain, her heart racing. The world around her smelled of danger and blooming flowers. Love in a place like this was not a gift. It was a blade. By the next morning, the whispers had grown louder. The prince was seen walking the gardens at midnight. With whom? No one knows, but the Queen's attendants are asking questions. Lady Yvel visited the servants' hall, smiling too sweetly, asking too many things. Elara felt the walls closing in. Even Mira had grown pale with worry. "Elara," she pleaded, "you can't hide from her. If the Queen suspects—" "She already does," Elara whispered. "All I can do is stay ahead." Mira grabbed her arm. "And how will you do that?" "By finding out why she's afraid of me." That night, as thunder rumbled beyond the palace walls, Adrian found Elara again, this time in the armory, where she had been delivering cloth to polish the blades. "You shouldn't be here," he said, his voice rough. "I could say the same," she murmured, running a hand over the gleaming steel. "But here we are." He exhaled, stepping closer. "You're playing with fire, Elara." "I didn't ask for this," she shot back, "but I won't cower either." "You think defiance will save you?" he said, frustration breaking through his composure. "I've seen nobles burn for less." She turned to face him fully. "Then why do you care, Adrian? Because it's your duty? Or because you—" Her words died as his expression shifted, raw, unguarded. "Because I can't stand to see you destroyed," he said quietly. "Because He stopped himself, shaking his head. "You deserve a life outside these walls, not as a pawn in their games." Elara stared at him, her heart twisting. "And you deserve more than a uniform that keeps you silent." For a long moment, neither spoke. Then, softly, she said, "We're both trapped, aren't we?" Adrian looked at her, and in his eyes she saw a truth he could not say. "Yes," he whispered, "but only one of us will escape." Days later, the palace held a masquerade, a lavish display meant to celebrate Cale's engagement. The hall glittered with gold and laughter, but beneath the masks eyes watched, judged and measured. Elara, hidden among the attendants, watched Cale dance with Lady Alessandra beneath a canopy of silk. They moved perfectly together, beautiful and empty, a prince and his bride for all to see. Yet even across the crowded room, she felt his gaze flick toward her, once, then again. A fleeting, invisible thread stretched between them, one that no mask could hide. And high above, from her balcony, the Queen watched them all, her fan hiding a smile sharper than any blade. "Let them dance," she murmured to herself. "Soon enough, the music will end." When the night ended, Elara slipped away to the gardens once more. She stood before the same fountain where Cale had held her hand, staring at her reflection rippling in the moonlit water. Behind her she heard the soft rustle of footsteps. She turned, expecting him. But it was not Cale. It was Lady Alessandra. "So it's true," the noblewoman said softly, her mask hanging loosely in her hand. "The servant with the rose-coloured eyes." Ilara's throat tightened. "My lady, Hush!" Alessandra's smile was brittle. "I'm not your enemy, girl. Not yet. But take this advice. Whatever game you're playing, end it. The Queen's patience has limits." "I'm not playing any game," Ilara said, her voice trembling. "I only serve." "Then serve quietly," Alessandra replied, "because if you make the prince love you, it won't be his heart that breaks, it will be yours." She turned and vanished into the shadows, leaving Ilara alone with the scent of roses and the weight of her warning. As dawn broke, the first drops of rebellion began to fall, unseen, unheard, but inevitable. In the Queen's private chamber, Seraphine stood over a parchment sealed with crimson wax. A letter from the border. Trouble brewing, whispers of a revolt in her husband's absence. Her eyes flicked toward the city below. "The time comes sooner than I thought." She turned to Yvel. "Bring me the girl." Yvel bowed low. "Alive, Your Majesty?" Seraphine's smile was slow, deliberate, for now. The blood of queens. The morning broke heavy with rain, soft at first, then relentless, washing the golden palace in a sheen of silver. The banners on the ramparts sagged under the weight of water. The air smelled of iron, and thunder rolled faintly in the distance. It was as though the heavens themselves knew something was coming. Ilara woke before dawn, her mind restless. The night had been filled with whispers in the servants' wing. The Queen had summoned her. No explanation, no reason, just a cold order from the throne. She tried to steady her breathing as Mira helped her braid her hair. Her hands trembled. "You don't have to go," Mira said quietly. "You can tell them you're ill." "They'd drag me there anyway," Ilara replied. "Better to walk on my own feet." She glanced once at the small locket hidden beneath her collar, the only remnant of her mother. It had always been a mystery to her, engraved with a single symbol, a sun encircled by 7 stars. She had never known what it meant. But lately, she'd seen the same crest carved into the older stones of the palace, as though it had once been part of Orith's royal seal, and then erased. The Queen's chambers were unlike any other place in the palace. Cold, elegant, and deathly, still. Guards stood at attention beside doors of carved obsidian. The only light came from tall, narrow windows that painted the floor in ribbons of grey. Ilara was ushered in and forced to kneel. "Your Majesty," she whispered. Seraphine of Orith sat by the window, her back straight, her gown the colour of midnight wine. Her beauty was as sharp as the jewels on her fingers. "Rise," the Queen said, her voice smooth and deadly. "I have questions, and I expect only truth." Ilara rose slowly, her heart pounding. "Tell me," Seraphine began, "how long have you served in this palace?" "Since I was a child, Your Majesty." "And who brought you here?" Ilara hesitated. "The steward. He said I was found at the gates during the winter famine." "Yes," the Queen said softly, "a nameless orphan, conveniently placed where she could see and hear things." Her gaze sharpened. "Do you know why I've tolerated your presence, girl?" Ilara swallowed. "Because I've done my duties faithfully?" Seraphine's laugh was like broken glass. "No, because I wanted to see what you would become." She rose, gliding forward until she stood mere feet away. "You've grown into something dangerous. You walk with my son's shadow. You speak words that make him question his crown. But it is not that which concerns me most." The Queen reached out suddenly, gripping Ilara's chin and forcing her to meet her gaze. "It's your eyes," she whispered. "The same shade as hers." Elara blinked. "Whose?" Seraphine released her sharply. "The woman who once tried to take everything from me, your mother." The words hit Elara like a blow. My mother?" she stammered. "Who was she?" "Oreth's first queen by right of blood," Seraphine said, her tone laced with venom. "Queen Lysandra, sister to the late king. A woman born with power she did not deserve, and ambition that nearly destroyed this realm." Elara's head spun. "That's impossible. Queen Lysandra died." "In exile," Seraphine interrupted. "Pregnant, alone, hunted by those loyal to me. We thought she and her child perished in the mountains." The queen's eyes gleamed coldly. "But it seems fate has a cruel sense of humor." Elara staggered back. The locket beneath her collar burned like fire against her skin. "No," she whispered, "that can't be true. Believe what you will," the queen said, turning away. "But your blood is poison to this palace. It belongs to those who would unseat my house." She glanced over her shoulder, her expression dark. "Leave Oreth by nightfall, or I will do what should have been done long ago." Elara fled the chamber, her breath ragged, her mind reeling. She stumbled through the corridors until she reached the old library, the place that had always felt safe, a refuge of quiet pages and forgotten truths. The rain outside had grown heavier, drumming against the glass. She collapsed onto a bench, clutching the locket, her thoughts in chaos. Could it be true? Had she spent her life serving the very bloodline that had destroyed her own? She remembered her mother's lullabies, half-forgotten melodies that spoke of a son born beneath stars, words that had never made sense. Now they did. The symbol on the locket, the 7 stars of Oreth's ancient crest. Her mother had been a queen, and she was her heir. The door creaked open. Kale stepped inside, drenched from the rain. "Elara," he said, breathless. "I heard. The guards are searching for you. What happened?" She looked up at him, her eyes hollow. "She knows." He froze. "The queen?" "She told me who I am," Elara whispered. "Who my mother was. Kale, I don't understand. Why would she hide me here? Why let me live?" Kale's jaw tightened. "Because she fears what your existence means." "She said my blood is poison," Elara said, trembling. "That my mother tried to claim the throne." Kyle moved closer, lowering his voice. "My father's sister, Queen Lysandra, was loved by the people, too loved. My mother feared her influence, so she accused her of treason. The truth was buried with her, or so we thought." Elara's breath caught. "So, it's true." He nodded slowly. "If she was your mother, then you are the rightful heir to Oreth, not me." The words fell between them like thunder. Elara shook her head. "I never wanted a throne." "And yet the throne may come for you," Kyle said. "The nobles who despise my mother will use you as their banner. They'll call it destiny. They'll call it justice, and you will be caught in their war." He stepped closer, his voice fierce. "Run, Elara, before it begins." She looked up at him and saw not the prince, not the ruler, but the man she had come to love. "Would you come with me?" He froze. "You know I cannot." "Then I'll stay," she said, "because I will not run from who I am." Kale's hand brushed her cheek, aching and desperate. "You don't understand. The moment she sees you as a threat, she already does," Elara whispered. "And maybe it's time she should." By nightfall, the rain had turned to storm. The palace trembled beneath the wind. Adrian Vale stood outside the council chamber, listening as the queen gave her orders. "She is to be captured before dawn," Seraphine said, "alive if possible, but do not let her cross the walls." Adrian's stomach turned. "Your Majesty," he said carefully, stepping forward. "The girl is harmless. If you imprison her without cause, the servants will—" "Captain," the Queen interrupted, her tone icy, "you will do as you are commanded, unless your loyalty has weakened." Adrian bowed stiffly. "Never, Your Majesty." But as he left the chamber, rain soaking through his cloak, he knew the choice before him was impossible. Obey his Queen, or save the girl who had become his heart's undoing. It was near midnight when the guards came for Ilara. She had taken refuge in the stables, the storm raging outside, when torchlight flickered against the walls. Steel boots echoed through the hay. "Search every stall!" one of them barked. "The Queen wants her alive!" Ilara pressed herself against the shadows, her heart pounding. The rain masked her breath until a hand caught her wrist. She gasped, then froze. "Adrian, come," he whispered, "quickly." He pulled her through a side door, down a narrow passage leading toward the old aqueduct tunnels beneath the palace. "Adrian, what are you—" "Saving you," he said harshly. "You don't have time to argue." They ran through the dark, water splashing underfoot, the thunder above muffled by stone. When they reached the outer gates, Adrian stopped. "There's a path through the lower cliffs," he said. "Follow it until you reach the river from there. Come with me," she pleaded. He hesitated. "I can't. They'd hunt us both." "You think they won't anyway?" Adrian's hand tightened on hers. "Ilara, listen to me. You were born to survive this, to rise above it. Don't die trying to prove something to people who will never see your worth." Tears burned her eyes. "And what of you?" He smiled faintly, a soldier's broken kind of smile. "I'll hold them off. Buy you time. Maybe for once, I'll be fighting for something I believe in." Before she could speak, he pressed something into her palm, a silver pendant shaped like a blade entwined with a rose. "For luck," he said softly, "and for remembrance." Then he turned, drawing his sword. As the sound of pursuit echoed down the tunnel, "Go!" he shouted. Ilara ran, into the rain, into the dark, into the storm that waited for her destiny. Behind her, the clash of steel rang out, and the voice of the Queen's captain roared defiance until it was swallowed by thunder. By dawn, word had spread beyond the palace walls. A girl of royal blood had escaped. The Queen's guard was dead or missing. The city whispered the name of a long-lost heir, Ilara Lysandria of Oreth, daughter of the true Queen. And as the sun broke through the clouds, banners began to rise in the distant villages, banners of gold and white, marked with a sun surrounded by 7 stars. The blood of queens had returned. The fall of the Golden Palace. The Palace of Oreth had always stood like an unshakable crown above the kingdom, its golden domes gleaming over marble walls, its banners a symbol of eternal order. But that morning, the sun rose over smoke. The first fires began in the lower city. By noon, they had reached the gates. For the first time in generations, the palace's silence was broken by the sound of war. Kyle stood at the highest balcony, his cloak whipping in the wind, watching as columns of smoke darkened the horizon. He had been awake for days. Sleep had long since abandoned him. Behind him, the council bickered like frightened crows. "The rebels are at the bridge," one shouted. "They fly her banner," another cried. "The people have turned, my lord. They call her Queen Ilara." The words struck like knives. Kyle dismissed them all with a single command: "Leave me." When the chamber emptied, he gripped the cold marble railing and let his composure fracture. Ilara! He had sent riders across every province to find her. Some never returned. Others brought only rumors. of a woman with rose-colored eyes who healed the wounded and spoke with fire in her voice. They said she carried no sword. They said her words were enough. He almost smiled at the thought. She had always been stronger than she believed. Down the hall, Queen Seraphine presided over the war chamber. Her hands were steady, her expression calm, but her eyes burned with the ferocity of a cornered wolf. "The peasants do not rise on their own," she said coldly. "They are guided, fed by lies. I want their leaders found and broken." A messenger bowed low. "Your Majesty, the rebellion claims to fight in the name of the true heir." "The bastard of a dead traitor," Seraphine snapped. "I will burn her name from this kingdom." Kale entered then, rain dripping from his cloak. "You cannot burn what the people already worship." His mother turned slowly. "You would defend her still, even now, when she seeks to destroy us?" "She seeks justice," Kale said quietly. "Something this court forgot long ago." Seraphine's voice cut the air. "You forget yourself." "No," Kale said, stepping closer. "For once, I remember who I am, and what we've done to keep this throne." The Queen's expression hardened. "You are my son. You will defend this crown. And if I refuse, then you are no son of mine." Their eyes locked, fire meeting frost. For a heartbeat, the past, mother and child, queen and heir, stood between them like a shattered mirror. Kale bowed once. "Then perhaps that is mercy." And he walked out, the door slamming like thunder behind him. Far beyond the palace, Ilara rode at the head of a growing army. Farmers, soldiers, and exiles united beneath the sun and stars banner. Mud clung to her boots, rain to her hair, but her eyes burned with purpose. She had not meant to become their leader. She had fled only to survive. But every village she passed, every family she spoke to, the same plea echoed, "Save us from the Queen." And so she stayed. She learned to command, she learned to lead. At her side rode Captain Adrian Vale's lieutenant, a young soldier who had escaped the palace with his dying captain's last words, "Protect her." He had brought Adrian's sword to her, and the news of his death. She wore that sword now, strapped across her back, though she had never drawn it. Not once, not yet. When her scouts rode up to her that morning, mud-spattered and breathless, she knew what they would say before they spoke. "The palace gates are open, my lady. They're waiting." Ilara looked toward the horizon, toward the walls that had once been her prison, her home, and her destiny. "It ends today," she said. That night, before the assault began, Kyle rode down from the palace walls, alone. He found her waiting by the river, where the mist was thick and the reeds bent low. When she turned, her cloak whipped around her like wings. "Ilara," he breathed, "you shouldn't be here." "Nor should you," she said softly, "but here we are." For a long moment, neither spoke. The rain fell between them, a curtain of grief and longing. "You've started a war," Kale said at last. "No," she replied. "Your mother did. I'm only ending it. You'll destroy everything my family built." "I'm saving what's left of it," she said. "The people are starving, Kale. They die while your court feasts. You think I don't know?" His voice cracked. "You think I wanted this throne, this blood on my hands?" Ilara stepped closer. "Then help me change it." He looked at her, torn between duty and desire, between the world he was born to and the one she promised. "If I stand with you, I betray my crown." "If you don't," she whispered, "you betray your soul." Rain traced her face like tears. Kyle's hand lifted, trembling, brushing a strand of wet hair from her cheek. "I love you," he said hoarsely, "but love cannot save this kingdom." "No," she said, "but it can rebuild it." She turned from him, her cloak sweeping the mud, and mounted her horse. "When the sun rises, we march. Choose where you stand, Kyle." And she rode into the mist. Dawn came blood-red. The rebels advanced through the valley like a storm, their cries echoing against the marble walls. Arrows darkened the sky. The palace gates groaned as siege towers rolled forward. From the battlements, Kale watched the chaos unfold, the clash of steel, the fire, the endless screaming. And then, through the smoke, he saw her, Alara, riding at the front, unarmored, carrying a banner instead of a blade. Her courage struck him like a wound. "Sound the retreat," he ordered suddenly. The general stared. "My lord?" "I said retreat," his voice thundered. "I will not have Orith's name written in blood." The horns blared. The royal troops pulled back toward the courtyard. Confusion rippled through both sides, the rebels slowing, unsure. Kyle seized that fragile silence and rode out to meet her. They met on the shattered steps of the palace, rain falling in silver sheets, smoke curling around them. "Ilara," he called, "no more. This ends here." "It ends when she's gone," she said, her voice steady. "She will not surrender. Then I will take her crown, myself." Inside the throne room, Queen Seraphine waited, a blade in her hand, her crown still gleaming, though the roof trembled with thunder. When Ilara entered, guards lay scattered behind her. Her cloak was torn, her face streaked with soot and rain. "So," the queen said quietly, "the bastard child returns." Ilara's eyes blazed. "The people call me their queen." "Fools," Seraphine hissed. "They will learn the cost of rebellion." Ilara stepped forward. "You fear me because you see what you destroyed. Compassion, justice, love. You traded them for fear." Seraphine raised her blade. "You are no ruler. You are a servant playing dress-up with destiny." "Then let destiny decide," Ilara said. The fight was swift and brutal. Steel met steel, the clash ringing through the Golden Hall. Seraphine fought like the predator she was, fast, ruthless, trained. But Ilara fought with something greater, purpose. When their blades locked, the queen snarled, "You think your blood makes you strong?" "No," Ilara whispered, pushing forward. "My heart does." With a twist of her wrist, she disarmed Seraphine. The queen fell to her knees, her crown rolling across the floor with a hollow clang. Kyle burst into the hall just as Ilara raised Adrian's sword, but she hesitated. Killing her would end the cycle, or begin another. She lowered the blade. "No more queens born from hate," Ilara said softly. "Your reign ends here, not by blood but by truth." Seraphine stared up at her, shock and fury mingling in her eyes. Then she spat, a single word, "Weak." Kyle approached, lifting the fallen crown. He looked between them, his mother broken but unbowed, and Ilara trembling but unyielding. "You were wrong," he said to Seraphine. "Power was never yours to keep." Then, without ceremony, he set the crown at Ilara's feet. The fighting stopped by dusk. The gates were opened. The people entered the palace, not as conquerors, but as witnesses. Ilara stood before them, no crown on her head, no armor on her shoulders, and spoke with a voice that carried through the smoke. "The throne of Oreth will no longer belong to blood, but to those who bleed for this land. Today, we rebuild, not as rulers and servants, but as one." And the crowd, battered and broken, knelt, not in submission, but in unity. Kyle watched her, something soft breaking inside him. He knew then that he would never sit upon that throne, and that he didn't need to. He would stand beside her instead. That night Ilara walked through the ruined hall. Where once gold and marble gleamed, there was only ash and silence. She found coal there, standing where the throne had been. "It's over," she said. He turned, a faint smile ghosting his lips. "No, it's only beginning." She stepped closer, resting her hand in his. "You could have stopped me." "I tried," he said. "Then I realized didn't want to." They stood together, surrounded by the ghosts of what had been and the promise of what could be. The queen without a crown. The fires had died, but the smoke lingered, a ghost over the city of Oreth. Alara stood upon the palace balcony at dawn, the horizon stretching before her in shades of gold and grey. Below, the courtyards where servants once whispered, now thrummed with the sound of rebuilding. Hammers, laughter, the cries of children who had never known peace. She still wore no crown. She never would. When she first walked through the shattered throne room after the siege, the nobles had fallen to their knees. "Your Majesty," they had called her, Queen Alara. But she had only shaken her head. "I was born a servant," she had said, "and I will serve again, this time not a throne, but a kingdom." The council was uneasy. Power had always worn jewels in Oreth. They did not understand a ruler who refused them. 3 weeks after the fall, Alara gathered the surviving lords, soldiers and peasants alike in the Grand Hall, once a place of gold and arrogance, now stripped bare of its finery. "From this day," she declared, her voice echoing against the marble, "there will be no thrones, no crowns, no masters. This palace will be the people's court. Every voice shall matter. Every life will count." An old nobleman scoffed. "You think peasants can govern a kingdom?" Alara met his eyes calmly. "I think those who suffer for it have earned the right to heal it." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Some bowed in respect, others in fear. From the corner Kyle watched her, not as a prince, not as a soldier, but as a man in awe. He had seen her frightened, bleeding, grieving, and yet she stood now with a strength that silenced the hall. After the assembly, he followed her to the gardens, those same gardens where they had first spoken years ago, when she was only a servant sweeping marble paths. "Do you realize what you've done?" he asked softly. Alara smiled faintly. "I've undone everything your mother built." "And everything my father died for," he added quietly. Her gaze softened. "Then perhaps we can build something better." He took her hand. "Together?" She nodded once. "Together." That night, Cale went to the royal dungeons. The guards hesitated as he approached the final cell, the one that held Queen Seraphine. She sat upon a stone bench, her once perfect hair tangled, her dress torn. But her eyes, those cold, commanding eyes, had lost none of their fire. "So," she said when he entered, "has your peasant queen decided my fate?" Kyle hesitated. "Alara does not seek vengeance." "She should," Seraphine said bitterly. "It would make her strong." "She already is." His mother's lips curved into something almost like a smile. "Then she will rule longer than I did." "She will not rule at all," Cale said. "She refuses the crown." Seraphine laughed, a hollow, broken sound. "Then she is a fool." Kyle turned to leave, but her voice stopped him. "You love her." He froze. "I can see it," she said softly. "In your eyes. The same way your father once looked at me, before love became weakness." "She is not you," Cale said. "No," Seraphine whispered, "and thank the gods for that." For a fleeting moment, Cale saw not the queen, but the woman, a mother who had lost everything she built, undone by her own pride. He bowed his head. "I will see that you live," he said quietly. "That is Ilara's mercy, not mine." And he left her to the silence of her fall. Weeks passed. The kingdom began to breathe again. Farmers returned to their fields. Bells rang not for war, but for weddings. And though the people begged her to accept the title, Elara refused. One afternoon, the council arranged a coronation, insisting that Oreth needed a symbol, something to unite them. When she stepped into the hall, the nobles rose with a golden circlet waiting upon a velvet cushion. The hall went silent. Kyle stood beside her. "It's your choice," he murmured. Elara looked at the crown, gleaming, fragile, heavy with centuries of blood. Then she reached down, lifted it, and set it gently on the empty marble throne. "This belongs to no one," she said simply. "Let it remind us that power must serve, not rule." The hall erupted, some in confusion, others in tears. And in that moment, the legend of the Queen without a crown was born. The promise, beneath the dawn years passed. The kingdom of Oreth became something new. Not an empire of gold, but a land of fields and song. The palace was no longer a fortress, but a sanctuary, a place of learning, where children studied and healers tended to the wounded. Elara spent her mornings among them, teaching little ones to read beside the fountains where she once scrubbed marble floors. Her hands still bore the scars of war, reminders of what it had cost to bring peace. Kyle worked by her side, helping to train the guards who now swore allegiance not to a crown, but to the people. Their love grew not in secrecy or passion alone, but in shared purpose. Quiet, unshakable, real. One spring morning, Kale found her standing beneath the old willow tree in the courtyard, the very one where she had once dreamed of freedom. "You still come here," he said, smiling faintly. "It reminds me where I began," she replied. He stepped closer. "You've given this kingdom everything. Don't you ever wish to rest?" She turned toward him, eyes soft and wise. "Rest will come, but not yet." Kale brushed a strand of hair from her face. "The people call you Mother of the New Dawn?" She laughed gently. "A grand name for a girl who once scrubbed their floors." "They love you. They love hope," she corrected. "I only gave it a name." For a moment, silence stretched between them, warm, peaceful, complete. Then Kyle reached into his cloak and withdrew a small silver band, simple, unadorned, forged by his own hand. "It's not a crown," he said quietly, "but it's all I have to offer." Her eyes filled with tears, the kind she had long learned to hold back. "You already gave me everything, Kale, a world worth living in." "Still," he said, slipping the ring into her palm, "let me give you forever." She smiled, leaning into his touch. "Then stay with me until forever ends." Years later, when songs were sung of Elara of the courtyard, the servant who became the savior, the storytellers always ended with the same image. A woman standing on a balcony at sunset, the wind in her hair, watching over a kingdom that had finally found peace. Beside her, a man whose love had weathered every storm. They ruled not with crowns, but with hearts. And their names became legend, whispered in the halls where gold once glimmered and hope had been forgotten, because she had been born to serve the palace, but destined, truly, eternally, to rule it.